every once in a while, I come across something on YouTube or in this case, watching TV or in the news, and the personality of someone will grab me. And it's usually a person who had incredible creativity, drive, and vision, and became famous as a result. And the person who I'm going to talk about tonight, who really grabbed me, is someone who affected my life to a large degree, especially growing up. And that's Walt Disney. Now, the word Disney is probably one of the most famous American brands there is, the Disney brand, and it's been around for almost 100 years. Now, Walt Disney was a man who believed in himself and the vision of what he wanted to create. And more important than what he wanted to create was he really wanted to make people feel. That's what he wanted to accomplish. He wanted to make people feel what he had in his mind that he wanted to create. Every project that he worked on was building on the success of the project before it. And he was scouring all of the resources available at that time to be the very first one to get up on the latest technology that had to do with making cartoons, color, incorporating sound, and all that. Now, there's two sayings he had that really impressed me. One of them is, if you can dream it, you can do it. And the other one was, for every laugh, there has to be a tear. And if you look through the body of his work, he really did believe that. And just as in life, with every laugh there has to be a tear. That's just the way life is. And his movies were a depiction of stories that brought out the emotions that we experience in life, which is one of the reasons why he was so popular and became, ultimately, one of the most incredible icons of American culture. Now, Walt Disney was born in Chicago in 1901, and his childhood wasn't particularly great. It wasn't particularly bad. His father was a very unsuccessful, just plain unsuccessful in life. One company after another, failures, and tried this business, tried buying this company. There was one spot in his childhood that was very memorable, and we can see it depicted at Disneyland today, and that's the Main Street of Disneyland in Anaheim. For about 5 years in his youth, he lived on a farm in Marceline, Missouri, and that made a huge impression on his life that we would come to find out later, and I'm going to talk about that after one of his big breakdowns, because there was a lot of things about him that fascinated me. He reminded me of Steve Jobs, and he reminds me a little bit of Elon Musk. Every dollar he made went right back into the company, into creating the next project. And he also sacrificed his own personal fortune and the future of his companies with every project. He didn't care. He was so driven that that's all he could think about. Then this has to be what I want. Now, he was very bright in that he was a good artist, and he knew it at a very young age. And his father was not supportive. His father tried to discourage him because his father had been discouraged in life. When Walt Disney had his first success, his father said, well, don't think it's going to last too long. Prepare yourself for failure, and prepare yourself to work in the jelly factory that I just bought in Chicago. But anyway, let me get back to the chronology of his life. When he was 16, he dropped out of high school because World War I was raging in Europe. And he went and joined the war effort for a little while, came back, and he was barely 18. And he didn't want to go move back with his parents, so he had a brother, Roy, living in Kansas City. And Roy was one of 3 brothers he had, but Roy would be with him throughout his life, and he would be the partner in business that was going to be guiding the finances, which were like this, all throughout Disney's career. Now, when he was 19, he moved back to Kansas City and worked in an ad company where he met a man named U.B. Iwerks, who went by Ub Iwerks. Ub Iwerks was a critical part of Disney's success. He's the one responsible for bringing Mickey Mouse to life. Walt was responsible for creating the character Mickey Mouse. But Ub Iwerks is the one who really brought him to life. And he opened up Disney Brothers Studio. Now, he was working on a project called Alice in Cartoonland. And it was something he was doing in the evenings, as well as working at this ad agency. He was going to all the movie theaters, he was going to the libraries, he was combing all the literature. And he was working on this little series, and the company went bankrupt because he ran out of money before he could finish. And he had a problem throughout his life of being over budget and over time. And this was evident from the beginning. So he declared bankruptcy and starts thinking about what he's going to do next. And he had some ideas. He gets a phone call from a woman in New York who saw the little short of the Alice in Cartoonland, and she hired him to do a dozen 12-minute shorts for $1,500 each, and that was big money back in 1922. So he brought some of the gang from Kansas City to get going on this Alice in Cartoonland. Now, he was aware of his competitors big time, and one of his competitors was Felix the Cat. Now, in addition to doing the Alice, he started working on a character that was going to be a competitor to Felix the Cat, and this was Oswald the Rabbit. Now, he created Oswald the Rabbit. He didn't decide on a rabbit at first, but let me show you a little bit of what you can do with cartooning. I wanted to be a cartoonist when I was a girl. Now, we have a little generic okay, let's make it a bunny rabbit. Okay? The tail and the big feet give it away as being a bunny rabbit. Right? Now, we just change the ears and we can turn it into, and the tail and the feet, we'll turn it into a little squirrel. Like that. Now, we can turn it into a mouse by giving it great big ears. Whoop. Oh. Big ears. What kind of tail do mouse have?
Straight.
Hi, Julia. It's like that. And you got a mouse now. But this is what they decided on a mouse, that Disney's wife was initially going to call it Mortimer. No, Disney was going to call it Mortimer, and his wife said, no, let's call him Mickey. Now, Mickey Mouse was the beginning of the entire Disney empire. You need to know that in 1926, cartoons were they were made by a bunch of old white men, and they were crude and urban and risque. A lot of gags and a lot of slapstick. And basically what Walt Disney did, he elevated cartoons to an art form that no one had ever seen before. And between 1937 and 1942 is what's called the golden age of animation. And it began with Snow White. Snow White was going to be Disney's big folly. But as it turned out, it became such an international hit instantly. No one had ever worked with color the way he did in Snow White. My mother was about 10 years old at the time, and she remembers that the lines were around the blocks. Mm-hmm. But the success of Snow White led to the 5 movies that really made him famous, which were Pinocchio, Fantasia, Bambi, and Dumbo. Now, he had a big strike in 1941, the animators strike, put him into a very severe depression. And upon the advice of his doctors and his brother, they sent him to South America, where he did some work for the military, for a program that was fighting Nazism. This was all during World War II, so the entire 40s, he was doing work with Donald Duck in an Academy Award short that won him an Academy Award called Der Fuhrer's Face. And it's about Donald Duck living in a post-war Germany with Hitler as the president. But anyway, I'm running out of time here. But basically, what really strikes me about Walt Disney was his resilience after he suffered many defeats, and he had 2 mutinies, very similar to Steve Jobs. And like Steve Jobs, he also built a huge 51-acre campus in Burbank that he thought was going to make his employees so happy. But actually, they all revolted, and he accused the union organizers of being communists. So he had some dark side that included some racism in his hiring practices, and also his he was a McCarthy sympathizer. But people don't really know, people don't talk about the negative parts of Walt Disney much, because the body of his work is absolutely so incredible. And it really does bring to mind his life, that if you dream something, look at what one person could do. He brought us the first animated movies, and then the TV shows. The Mickey Mouse show was the very first daily TV show, and my mother said it was the best babysitter that mothers in the 50s ever had. He brought record labels. The merchandising helped be the bread and butter money that kept paying for all his subsequent projects. Vacation resorts, I haven't even gotten into Disneyland yet, but all of this came about, started with a blank piece of paper and a mouse.